Coogs House. All right, the Space City theme is coming, kind of. Do we get a blue uniform? What does this mean?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen today. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. Where do you start brushing your teeth? Are you a front person, a back? Do you get the back of the molars? Where do you start brushing your teeth? You do it a couple times a day, I hope. So pay attention. Today's show is brought to you by Today's Locked On Cougs is brought to you by Game Time. More on them later. An exciting place to be working with these days. All things lowest price on tickets guaranteed. Fun stuff to the show today. We're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about the rally tackling of the defense, and I want to kind of try to place this defense historically and kind of contextualize what we're watching here with this dominant Houston Cougar defense through 3 games. But first, the news today from Tuesday is actually about a sponsor. And you could almost argue that it didn't have anything to do with Houston, except that it's TDECU, the name sponsor for the football stadium, is changing their name. And thus, TDECU will also be changing its name. The official name coming forward is that's my unofficial sound. Yeah, that's as if I hit a button or something. Dun, 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 dun. Space City Financial Stadium is the official name, it looks like, in the mock-ups people are posting online. It looks relatively official. Space City Capital. I have to say, this is leaning into Houston a lot, and I love it. It's been TDEC for 10 years, and it's time to change. Now, admittedly, this is changing because TDECU as a company has changed their name, right? It's not like the University of Houston got any pull in this, but man, oh man, is it a lot of fun. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go with this nickname. We got a lot of time to do it. We'll get into that in a second. Are you going to space? The space places. The student section will be mission control. Do we need to pass out astronaut helmets for the students in the first home game in the new stadium? How many different things can we go with here? But there are 2 things I think we need to really, really focus on. One, this means we need a space-themed uniform. And I've seen both comments that we need like red moon rocks or red Mars rocks or whatever. And that would probably be closer to school colors, I guess. But space also gives us a great excuse to use blue, like my hat I have on here, and bring back those beautiful blue uniforms from before. Now, I can already see the older folks commenting that those are not our colors. And I do think that while they should wear red and white for most of their games, I'm not saying they shouldn't, an alternate wouldn't hurt anybody. There, I said it. I think that the space race blue uniform, Space City uniform, Space City blue, outer space blue, it could be a dark blue. We go to navy, I guess, right? Be like out in the great beyond. I think, all of that, Milky Way kind of stuff. Sell Milky Way at the stadium. Oh my God, make Milky Way the cheapest candy. We're keep this thing going. I think that would all be a big time marketing plan. You're looking at how to add dollars and cents to your program. I tell you right now, if you made a light blue themed stuff and called it Space Blue and sold it like those uniforms you had for game 1 a year ago against UTSA, it would sell fast. I don't even know that necessarily matters what price you'd put on it. It would sell fast. That's the first thing I think, is that we get some sort of a play on it in a uniform soon, and we need it. And frankly, once it does well in football, you can extrapolate that into men's basketball, women's basketball, tennis, soccer, everything, right? The other side of this is, UCF is pissed. Central Florida considers themselves a space type capital. Orlando's an admittedly, involved city in the space things. It's not quite the communication center that Houston is, but they are involved. I don't mean to say they're not. And then Central Florida feels like they put out a lot of engineers to go work in that field, and so that's, I guess, what they feel like. I think that I've laid this case out before, but I think that the space race as a rivalry between Houston and Central Florida would be a lot of fun. I think it'd be a creative trophy and it could be all that kind of stuff too. But creating that kind of an annual game between two similar universities in a lot of ways in how they got into the conference and their athletic histories and so on would actually be a really cool thing here. Both programs, in terms of football, were successful in the mid-teens. Houston went 13-1 and won the Peach Bowl in 2015. For what it's worth, UCF went 13-0 and won the Peach Bowl over Auburn that year, right? And both teams felt like they were very close to being a little bit bigger picture. If Houston doesn't drop that one game, they're probably playing something a little bit bigger time. Central Florida, as they went 13-0, called themselves national champs that year, right? I do think that while so Central Florida was founded as Florida Technical University, I think it was in the 60s as a part of the space program. Houston is the University of Houston, and Houston is the space center hub for NASA. So I think that you've got something going on there in this one as well. Both teams could wear a space-themed uniform. UCF has already done their handful of space-themed uniforms every year. They could go Cape Canaveral blue, and we could call it, Love You Blue or whatever we want to call it, Houston Blue, frankly, and those kind of things. They both also moved into the Big 12 at the same time a year ago. Houston moved in and kind of left a lot of old American Athletic Conference rivalries behind. Central Florida moved in and left a lot of the state of Florida behind, although we may get some of those later. But they moved in the conference, the only Florida school. And so, they leave a lot of those behind them. I do think that there would be some initial forcing of this rivalry. But on the whole, I think both schools approach the Big 12 as similar. They're both schools in cities. Orlando is not the size of Houston, but it sure ain't Lubbock. And I can say that because I've got family there. Orlando ain't Lubbock, right? I'm not going to go down too far in the family being Lubbock, but Orlando ain't Lubbock, right? And it sure ain't Stillwater and the Little Apple, none of that, right? I think there's something similar there. I think it's also kind of thing where both places feel like they're competing with, in terms of football recruiting and dollar raising, recruiting with other big time, big dollar programs. Obviously, Central Florida's got to compete with Florida, Florida State, Miami, but Houston's going to compete with A&M, Texas Austin, and LSU, right? Like the same kind of vibe and the same kind of region where we're all competing into. I think there's a lot of similarities and crossovers here, and I think based on some reactions from fans online, I think that it looks like there's a potential way to use, the stadium being renamed because the company's being renamed as a way to kind of add some fuel and gasoline to that fire. And I don't think that's wrong. From a marketing perspective, when you get given a gift, you need to accept it. Sometimes those gifts are dollars, and sometimes those gifts are just a rivalry or something to see if you can run with. And I think that there's a lot of potential here. Part of it's because, admittedly, I want something like a space race uniform and a space race trophy game. I think it's important to have trophy games. We're rebuilding and we'll never be bad again. But on the off chance that you were bad again, having a trophy game can kind of be a feel-good win in a rebuilding part of the year, right? And so I think those things are opportunistic and good. I don't mind having regular season trophy games. Bayou Bucket, right? We just had a big celebration over that one. I think this is the thing that could work out. I think adding a space type game with a space themed stadium, going to the space age, meet George Jetson kind of stuff. I think those things could all work out very, very well. Now, I want to talk about something that is present tense, no doubt about it, working out very well. I want to contextualize and talk about how well that thing is going, and that thing being the defense. But first, we got to talk a little bit about our buddies over at FanDuel, because FanDuel's got a cool set of stuff going on. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little bit different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5, $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season game Sunday afternoon, at a market, anything. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook today, put $5 down, get all you want Sunday ticket for the next couple weeks. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, the next thing I'll make sure you visit is Game Time, the Game Time app, because if you want to go to a space race themed game in these games, this new stadium, get ready for basketball season. I just heard they've got front row tickets to the Toyota Center to watch the Houston Cougars play the Auburn Tigers in basketball. And again, it's a bye week for the football program. You can go down to the Toyota Center and watch it. They're just $37 a ticket if you can go on to Game Time right now. So go to Game Time, download the Game Time app today. Last tickets, those prices guaranteed. They do all kinds of cool things, all on features, seat views, etc. But again, a single ticket to that game could be really, really affordable at Game Time. So download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I teach history, not math, but 37 times 2 minus the $20, $54 to take you and a buddy to that game and sit front row. Turns by again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Download Game Time today. Last tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so we mentioned that Houston has become a defensive team. And it's funny when you think of the legacy of the Houston Cougars in the football program. You think Andre Ware. You think of Case Keenum. You think of high-flying offenses, lots of touchdowns, lots of scoring. Greg Ward running all over people. You don't think about defensive units. You think about defensive players maybe at Oliver, right? The guys that stick out as being really good. But they kind of stick out because they were on an island. We don't think of a bunch of different historically good Houston Cougar defensive teams. It's not a program that's had that history, right? Some of these other programs, long illustrious histories of football, are known for having low-scoring games for the duration of their time on Earth, and they're just always in defensive battles. I think about like Iowa or something like that, right? That the Iowa punter was like their offensive MVP, right? Those kinds of things. And I don't never want to necessarily be as extreme as Iowa. It is interesting watching a defensive-based team this year, a team led by their defense, because I don't know how you feel about it. It's a little bit more anxiety-inducing. It's like, okay, we're not scoring a whole lot of points here. Any play could bust at any time. It just takes one college kid missing an assignment, and that adds a layer to this. It's a lot of fun, right? The heart pumping is part of the fun. That's what sports is about. Now Houston's 1-2. Obviously, they lost to what I think that people are realizing is a good UNLV team, and almost beat Oklahoma at their place. Head to Cincinnati this weekend. We're going to preview that on Thursday and Friday. Thursday with hosts that can help talk to us about it from their perspective, and then Friday I'll give you my keys to victory and those kinds of things. But neither here nor there. I am thinking Houston's going to win that game. I think Houston's going to win that game led by their defense. And I think it's getting to be the time, maybe a little early, but I think it's the time to start thinking about, like, where does this defense rank in the history of Houston Cougar defenses? Because, as we mentioned, it's not a school that has like a bunch of illustrious, statistical anomalies and all of that defense. It's frankly a team that has had a couple of years of good defense. So I thought about doing this a couple different ways, and I worked backwards in terms of time. And 2015, 16, 17 was kind of a chunk. Statistically, the 2011 defense was really strong. We'll talk about that in a second. And thought 1989 and 1979 were also both comparable. Admittedly, I was born in 1991, and so that's mostly looking at stats and asking a couple people older than myself what they thought. But I look at the 2015, 16, 17 teams, and I think 15 had the best defense, not because the team went 13-1. although that was part of it. But like William Jackson had 5 picks. A couple of those went back for touchdowns. They had 4 different multi-pick guys. Landon Roberts is a pro. Tyus Bowers is a pro. Like they had dudes on that defense. I think 16, the argument that a buddy of mine was trying to make with me when we were texting about this earlier, is that the 16 team, you add in Ed Oliver, even if you lose Roberts, DBs, they had a little bit older group there. The 16 team, they'd done the same team success. And then 17, obviously the person I'm talking to about this on the side texting is a pretty big Ed Oliver fan, because he pointed out quickly, like, that was the better version of Ed Oliver at that, right? I came back with, I mentioned the 2011 defense, admittedly, and we had to concede this part in this conversation. I think the 2011 defense was benefited a lot by the 2011 offense. The 2011 offense was scoring a crazy 49 points per game, and that frankly forced a lot of teams to be one-dimensional, and the Houston defense feasted on that. They knew other teams had to pass to keep up because the scoring was going to be too high-paced, right? And so I think that, I can get talked off that ledge and think that the current defense is better in some ways than each of those, right? Work with me here, but the 2015 team had a lot more offensive support, not quite as much as 2011, but a lot more offensive support than the present team has had through 3 games, right? 16 and 17 maybe not as much, but 16 certainly similar, right? And so you look at this, okay, wait a second, the defense is half the game, and I get that, but they do deal with the fields the offense leaves them. They do deal with the leads and game situations the offense leaves them in. And that's complementary football, right? That's nothing crazy different. But I do think that as good as that 2015 team is, I'm feeling pretty strong about this year's team currently defensively, right? With a offense that has been less effective. And I would love for that to change, frankly, and shift my opinion on that. They're doing a pretty good job. When you go back in time to 1989, that's actually the offense that 1989, that's actually the better offense in that they scored 53.5 points per game. Shouts to Andre Ware. But a lot like 2011, that dictates how the things go. Unlike 2011, they allowed a measly, they only allowed 13.5 points per game. And, yardage was different back then, stuff like that. They didn't allow very many yards either. And I think that 89 is probably, if I had been alive and conscious to watch it, the one that I'd feel was like comparable here. Again, though, a big part of their statistical success is that the offense, kind of helped cover up a lot of holes and shifted the game a lot. 1979 is one my folks tell me about. And 1979, they were top 10 in opponents' points per game, top 10 in opponents' yards, and they really did get after it. I admittedly, I think football itself was also a lot different back then. College football was a lot different back then. And I don't know that it's a fairly fair apples-to-apples comparison. This year, presently, the reason I think this is an interesting conversation, the reason I think that it's actually at least the best since the turn of the century, is that they're only allowing 16.7 points per game. And when you do the ratio that is overall defense that PFF does, when you factor in yards and expected yards and so on, they're in the top 15. Even in 2015, when Houston's defense was so dominant, they didn't necessarily have what I think was recognized as a nation's top unit. Because of, and admittedly, again, I wish this would change, but because of how bad the offense has been, they've only, put up 33 on Rice, and then they only scored 2 offensive touchdowns in the 2 games before that, and one was at the end of the game against garbage time backups. I do wonder if the magnifying glass gets put on the defense here more. Its defense looks a lot different too. It obviously is playing a modern version of football and having to cover a modern version of football. But I think that's weirdly a strength for it in this argument. I look at the guys and think, those guys could line up and play more traditional styles as well. Put Brandon Mack's hand in the dirt, change things up a little bit. I think they'd be okay. So, roundabout way to say, I guess statistically the best defense is 89. I feel like the offense gives them a big leg up because the way that would shift the game. I'm feeling pretty good about this defense they got right now being one of the best to ever wear Houston Cougar red. We'll see how that morphs and evolves. Now, I don't know one thing that defense is doing specifically and how it shifts a lot of things. But before we get to that, I got to tell you about our newest buddy here at Locked On, and that is Roy. Hey, have you heard of Roy? Should wait, slow down a little bit. It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL. Yes, that NIL, like never before, by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes, and Roy changes the NIL game for fans. You can directly support the players. Roy allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes. With Roy, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes get to maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. There's no risk contributions here. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athletes make the decision that aligns with the fan support. If not, the money is returned. Download Roy for iOS and Android. Enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 in cash. Just join Roy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get the Roy app for iOS and Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Use referral code Locked On for an opportunity to win $5,000 in cash. Again, Roy.com for more details. Get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game specifically with Roy. All right, I wanted to close here, and this is a 2-episode day because I had some technical issues the night before. So you got another episode of Locked On Coogs 2 where we talk about basketball, and got more this week. We're talking about getting ready for the Cincinnati game. But while we're talking about defense, I think what's interesting is Houston's defense this year has gotten exponentially better. I'm talking like cut the numbers down by 2/3 of their missed tackles from game one on. And honestly, I didn't think the defense was very bad in game one, and they've gotten that much better at it. And it also is a much better tackling defense in both Oklahoma and Rice games than it's been in several years. And some of that's coaching staff changes, obviously. Some of that's talent changes, obviously. Not all that talent changes. They were pretty talented guys a few years ago. But schematically, they're doing something that they're like playing for the rally tackle. And I think it's fascinating because so I coached the guy who had coached some college football that he'd been at Hawaii, Stanford, and Yale. And he was coming back to high school level for a number of different reasons. And we've actually lost touch, which is a shame that those things happen, right? But he was a defensive guy, I'm an offensive guy. And I am a fan on offense of like, hey, if they're going to give you 3 yards, you take it every time. You can't go broke making money, right? Like that's kind of the way I go about it. And he said, as a defensive coordinator, he called the first 4 yards the strike zone, as in let him throw it there and we'll hit him out of the park. And this is, to be fair, his strategy, his thought, the way he taught coverage. I don't know Shield. This is not necessarily what Coach Wood and Fritz are doing here. But essentially, he said, we're going to coach tackling up and be such sure tacklers that we want you to throw it there. And we want you to get 3 yards at a time on speed outs and stuff like that. And we're going to punish you. And we're going to get up and do it again and again and again. And eventually, you're either going to drop one, you're going to alligator arm one, you're going to try and throw over the top and it's not going to be there. You're going to make a mistake like that, and then everything gets, that's more natural human tendency. And what you're seeing Houston do that's similar to me, I don't know what their equivalent of a strike zone would be called, but what you're seeing them do, and I don't have the right to play game clips here, otherwise I'd be playing that here. Is their DBs are anyone in coverage, frankly, if as long as they're out of the box, are basically starting off every play 8 yards off the guy in front of them. There's no threat of press coverage. There may be a feigned threat and then a back off or something. Not a whole lot of up in a guy's mug. And then they're, I don't want to say playing true zone. There's some man principles in it and doing some swaps and some trading and stuff that's very normal in man-to-man defense. I think to do a very good job of balancing what they're doing in the back half. But whatever the case may be, they're allowing 2 yards, 3 yards, and then coming up making the tackle. And it's remarkable to see. And, players would tell you, I'm sure, that the way they coach this up is through being pretty critical in film. But it's remarkable to see how many, in the Rice game, it was red jerseys, how many red jerseys are at the football within like a half second of catching it on those short routes, right? You're seeing 7, 8, 9 jerseys at the ball as it's going to the ground. And I think we've seen that wear on people. We saw it wear on Oklahoma, right? We saw it wear on Rice. We saw it wear people down in a way that is effective. And again, I have no evidence they're using the strike zone mentality on the first couple yards, but it certainly does feel like it's a bend, don't break philosophy where, okay, we'll give you the first couple. We're going to come hit you. We're going to hit you with a lot of guys, right? And it requires, bluntly, a strong box. The defensive end, defensive tackle, linebackers in the box have to be strong enough, frankly, to kind of hold down the run game because their corners and safeties are backed off and can't come down and fill the box, right? Like that's a tough challenge. And I know that's probably hard for Halsey to do. He's doing it very well this year, but it probably is hard for Halsey to do because he loves playing in the box. Dude's a hitter, right? But what it's effectively doing to me is it looks like offenses are refusing to be patient enough to do anything about it. They're trying to find on that second down play on the, I gotta go deep. I gotta go deep. I gotta go deep. I gotta get this full 8 right now. And they don't, and that sets them up for 3rd and long, right? And I think that what's fascinating, and the guy's last name was Williams. I was talking to Coach Williams way back then. I was like, do you really think people will get that impatient? And he goes, everyone will get that impatient. And I think they're kind of rolling the same dice, right? Will anyone be patient enough to take those 3 yards at a time and move down the field on 3 yards at a time, passing the ball specifically and getting clobbered afterwards? Again, I coached high school football for a while. I don't think they are. I think that's adding fuel to the fire that Coach Williams was talking about once upon a time. And I think that's, frankly, a interesting thing to see when, we know that they're building the program. And I think Luttrell's really good. But they don't have the guys that go 4.18 or anything stupid in the 40, right? They've got good, hardworking guys that like playing football. And so let's let them play football. Go tackle a guy with the ball, right? Those kinds of things. And I'm intrigued by how it's worked out. I'm excited to see it continue. I think it works pretty well against Cincinnati this weekend. We'll get more into previews and score predictions, stuff like that throughout the week. I think Houston wins a low-scoring game in this one. I think Houston wins a low-scoring game because of the defense, because of this tackling, and things like that. But tomorrow, we'll be previewing it with some Cincinnati folks, and then on Friday, we'll give you how they win because I think they're going to win this one. Locked on Cougs is primarily the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.